This episode is part of the High Performance Mindset series powered by Nedap. And joining us today on the Nedap Power Play is Ron Dehli, a technical support manager for Nedap. Ron is the whiz at making technology around a milking system work. Hailing from Wisconsin, it's only natural that he's logged over 25 years in the dairy industry, being dedicated to milking equipment and precision dairy solutions. Let's tap into his expertise today on our Power Play. So the first question that I have for you today is we're going to talk a little bit about data. So just first off, define from a dairy perspective, what is accurate data collection and how does that really relate to accurate identification around the dairy?
Yeah, data collection is a very key topic. It's one of those basic conversation pieces that everybody wants to gather all this data and information, but nobody really necessarily wants to dive into the accuracy of that data. But as our dairy farms are growing in size and the number of cows per unit of labor are growing, the accurate data and the numbers that you're looking at on paper actually do mean something. And, that data should be, very accurate, and the integrity of the results, should be proven or checked.
Yeah. So just speaking more into the importance of accurate data, what is the power that the producer has in their hand, not just with data, but with accurate data?
Obviously, it's a tool to collect information remotely and to create baselines for animals. So you can basically manage, large groups of animals with smaller numbers of people. So you're not doing physical observations anymore. You're doing number crunching on a spreadsheet. You're doing group analytics with data that's being collected. And if we're, putting a sensor on a cow, we definitely want to make sure that the data that we're looking at is for the cow that we want it to be assigned to, not some other herd mate that's not performing.
Yeah. And so what you just referenced there, Ron, was collecting data when we put monitors on cows. But realistically, let's back up to the point of birth and the importance of identifying animals properly as soon as they hit the ground. Speak to that in this bigger picture of accurate data collection.
Yeah, in the recent years, it comes back to a huge topic of traceability. So, basically, if you can trace the product that you're buying in the store, back to a region, back to a customer, back to a dairy, back to a specific event, that's ultimately what the consumer is investing in. And so it trickles down from, buying decisions on products that have enforced or enabled our users to create data points for animals for life. So basically, when the calf is born, they're tagged. If they're a registered herd, they get a registered number that's issued in a national database, and then that animal is then tracked for life on basic events.
And really looking at that on farm level, Ron, how common is it that animals are misidentified at birth?
You hate to actually say it, but it's very common. People invest in ID systems, and they don't necessarily have a protocol or a system in place to go and monitor or to check whether that system is operating at its performance that they think it should be. Simple tag management, making sure that animals have tags, making sure that tags haven't been replaced or fallen out or ripped out by headlocks, for example, are a key player in tag management. So I think all too often ID systems or tags on cows are not necessarily something that are checked relatively frequently. It's just one of those things that it gets done once and people tend to forget about it.
Okay. And let's speak into that a little bit more when we talk about those checkpoints along the lifespan of the animal and along the farm. What types of tags should be used for identification checkpoints as we go through the system from taking that cow into the or taking that calf into the milking system?
Yeah, there's a wide range of different types of tags used for identification. Here in the United States, we have a government issued tag for national ID. It's a small ear button that is an RFID tag. It can be used for identification in milking parlors, but just know that it is a smaller tag. It is lower cost, and obviously some of the results with that may also be lower than, say, a large neck tag that was actually designed for animal ID. So you just have to understand the environment that you're putting the tags into and, what the results are that you want. So like I said, the national tag is very good for close range or hand wands or readers, to, see what's going on, to see or to identify that animal up close. But to do it in, say, a rotary parlor or a large parallel parlor, the range for that ear to the antenna may be large. There might be other environmental factors causing that read range to be smaller and not as accurate of a read rate. So just things to keep in mind when looking at tags, to make sure that the tag is designed for the system and monitor those results. Sometimes it's a good idea to create a protocol to critique that system once a month. Go out and check. Many systems out there will tell you if there's a few cows that are not IDing over and over and over, whether those cows are in the same pen or in multiple pens. Take a look at them. Do they have tags? Did the tags fail? Is there something that changed recently to induce the environment, causing the read range to decrease? So just simple protocols that can easily be put into place to verify and check that the ID is working.
And Ron, what you just explained is in reference to the identification purpose of the tagging and monitoring system. But let's switch gears a little bit and speak to the data collection side. What are the checkpoints on the dairy where dairy producers should be collecting data?
Correct. The ID is basically the beginning. So once the ID is on the animal, then we can collect data from the cow, whether it's a milking parlor with milk meters and we want accurate stall information, so date and time and milk amounts that cow is given, or in our case where we have a sensor on the neck that monitors animals' activity and basically her health monitoring throughout the day remotely. So you can, there's all kinds of sensors that you can, wearable technology, we coined the phrase, that a cow can have to record data points throughout her life cycle of that day.
Yeah. And so there's all these points where we can collect data. And again, one of the integral pieces of data collection is being able to have systems set up, as you had articulated there, Ron, to be able to actually read that data and that's coming from the tags. So go through a couple of scenarios. How close does a tag reader need to be to the cows to be able to accurately pull data? And you can walk us through maybe a couple examples from most dairy systems.
For sure. I mentioned earlier about an ear tag that's a national tag for an ID system. So that tag, it's an 840 RFID tag. Basically, the read range on that tag can be anywhere from 10 to 20 inches away from a panel antenna. So as the animal walks by the panel, the tag would be energized and then the data would be sent over, telling us what cow that is. Our wearable tags for data collection for activity and for health, those systems are on a different frequency, so they're ultra high frequency systems, and basically we can read basically the size of a football field. So if an animal is in a confined freestall facility, basically one antenna for the size of a football field to just kind of get a visual.
Wow. So we are really talking about a wide range of the ability for these readers to pick up that data. And let's go to the troubleshooting side. What can interfere with the ability for that reader to be able to transmit the data being collected into the system? Where are the troubleshooting spots that can happen along the way?
Yeah, great question. So if we're looking at an identification system, those tags are using a kilohertz frequency. That kilohertz frequency can be clouded by environmental interference, and that interference can come from most typically variable speed drives. So as dairies grow and their processes become larger, they use variable speed drives to save energy. So think of a variable speed drive as your washing machine. So it doesn't sit there and spin at the same RPM continually. It speeds up, it slows down. And when it does that, it's obviously throwing feedback onto the electrical network. So things like manure pumps, well pumps, even electrical lights do some sort of electrical feedback onto the grid that can cause interference with the read range of those tags. So, if you do run into an issue, it's always good to ask what changed. Did something recently get added? Did you add a new washing machine? Did you add a new well pump? Did you replace some wiring? There's a lot of practices that you can do to mitigate that environmental impact when you're installing these variable speed drives or variable frequency controllers. The number one thing to do is to make sure that the drive is installed as close as possible to the motor. I know that's not always possible when you have a well that's, maybe a few thousand feet from the barn, and they always want the drive in the equipment room. So you now have, a few thousand feet of cable that you have to monitor and use. But there are things that you can do to mitigate that by doing an isolation transformer or things like that with the installation to help mitigate that. But so look for drives, look for lights, look for things that possibly have recently failed or been replaced would be the things to do for troubleshooting.
And what if you need some help with being able to do that troubleshooting and find solutions on the dairy to be able to mitigate those risks of inaccuracy in the data transmission process? Where can our farmers find help for that?
The first place to start is your local equipment dealer. Whoever you purchase the ID system from, they should be well versed in how equipment should be properly installed and routed. If they can pinpoint the source of the environmental noise, then work with, say if it's your equipment dealer that finds a well pump, then you can work with whoever installed your well pump. If it's the same dealer or a different dealer, work with them together and try and, install it correctly to minimize that interference. And if worst case scenario, you can also sometimes get the power company involved. If it is something, that's not even on your location, but coming in on the grid. There have been some cases where, the farm's at the end of the line and they're just getting the power that the power company sends them, and they really don't control what that is. So sometimes the power company is more than willing to step in and help out as well.
That's a great tips and great advice there, Ron, on how to make sure that you have the resources available to be able to calibrate that data with a high level of accuracy. And speaking of accuracy, how can a dairy producer really assess that the data that they're bringing in through their identification, through tags and different identifications and through these different checkpoints along the way that we've talked about, whether they were on a reader or in a parlor? How can a dairy producer really assess how accurate the data that they're collecting is?
Yeah, I mentioned it briefly earlier. Just basically incorporate a simple protocol. Once a month, have one shift in the milking parlor, monitor a couple strings and see if the cows in the stalls are the actual cows that are standing in the parlor. That would basically verify if the ID system is working at its potential. A lot of times dairies will do herd health with a wand reader. So there they definitely want to know what cow that they're administering treatments to. So there's another way to protocol whether the tag is, properly allocated to the right cow. So hand readers are a fantastic tool. Most modern dairies with identification systems or sensors utilize them. And then just the protocol in the parlor just to make sure the cow's in the right stall.
Excellent. Well, this has been a great conversation, Ron, with some real life, real world, or real barn, I should say, tips that dairy producers can take home and use to really take a good hard look at the data they're collecting and be able to optimize it by making sure that it is as accurate as possible so that they have the power of the data in their hands to make those important decisions in their dairy farming businesses. Ron, thank you for joining us on the Nedap Power Play.
Thank you.